Hey y'all, Miss Iman back from Kind Academy talking to you about microschools as usual. I'm the CEO and founder of one of the fastest growing microschool networks in the country, and we have an international school as well. And today I'm going to be talking about the difference between a private school and a kind of part-time tutoring program. So I am in the state of Florida, and today what I am going to talk about is kind of specific to the state of Florida somewhat, but I'm going to make sure that I talk a little bit about how this extends out as well. All right. So yesterday, somebody in our community asked about whether or not they should become a private school or if they should stay like a homeschool kind of service program. And at least in the state of Florida, one of the things I really like to bring up is that going a private school route is beneficial for a lot of different reasons, but can be very challenging for a lot of different reasons. And I'm going to talk about some of those reasons now. So firstly, to become a private school in the state of Florida, it's not in and of itself difficult. But to become a private school that accepts state scholarships, which generally is what people are trying to do if you want to accept Step Up or if you want to accept AAA, if that's still around, I think. Basically, if you want to accept any of those, then to become a private school, it does take a lot of work. Generally, what that first step is like, you need to have zoning you need to be in a building that allows for it. And a lot of buildings don't really allow for it. There was recently a law passed, I think about a year or two ago, that basically said that you don't have to do generally something with the city. It's like a community meeting where the city decides a change of use is what they're usually called in most cities. This is kind of boring stuff. I know it's super boring, but it's really important stuff if you're thinking about becoming a private school in the state of Florida, because it is a big hurdle that I've seen people get into. So generally, when I start talking to people about opening a microschool, I really say your best bet is to generally go the part-time or even full-time tutoring route. Going the private school route is going to mean that your zoning, your building is going to have to be approved for it if you want to take state scholarships. Now, mind you, you can become a private school in the state of Florida and not have to do any of that. And all you have to do is something called a little piece of paper, an annual survey that basically just says that you're a private school. You don't have all these rules and regulations. And then you can grant diplomas, basically. That's step one for a private school. But if you want to become a private school that accepts state funding, now that's where you're going to be running into the conversation around you are going to have to do this, you're going to have to do that, you're going to have to basically make sure that your zoning is correct. You also need to maintain birth certificates, immunization records, and transcripts for your students. You also need to submit annual reports. You also are responsible for maintaining student records. You also need to get everybody fingerprinted that's going to be working with the students usually. It takes a lot of time and paperwork. And if you know me personally, you probably have heard that I don't love doing paperwork. I have an amazing COO who handles most of our administrative paperwork, and she likes that kind of stuff. If you have somebody on your team who really enjoys that kind of thing, then going the private school route could be for you, especially if you can find a building that's going to approve it. Generally, churches are really great at being approved for them. Museums are another great idea. At looking at community centers are another idea. Some commercial buildings may have it. Daycare centers usually are pretty good. Recreation centers are usually good for being in the state of Florida now, pretty much automatically approved. You still need to also get a fire inspection, and a health department inspection. Okay. Ask me how I know, because I've gone through this a lot of times with trying to get the approval for a private school. And I'm not saying that it's impossible, because I've seen people go through it and get it done pretty easily, pretty quickly. You also need one bathroom per gender, as well as a staff bathroom usually. So you generally need at least 3 bathrooms in most spaces. Different cities are different as well. I think that's another thing that becomes tricky. The fire inspectors in one city may say that this is okay. Other inspectors may say you need something like a fire panel, which can cost $100,000 if you're not careful. So, my answer when people ask if it makes more sense to become a private school or to stick with like homeschooling or part-time tutoring is what people generally go under in the state of Florida. Hey, Aisha. Generally, people decide to go under part-time tutoring in the state of Florida because you can still get funding under the law that passed about 3 years ago that allows you as a certified teacher or as a homeschool enrichment center to take funding. Now, the pros of private school, okay? If you are going to go the private school route, I think if you can get the private school route, I think honestly that would be the way that if I loved doing paperwork and if I loved managing kind of like all of the documentation that comes along with it, I would definitely go the private school route, because one of the big parts of it that I like is that funding wise, and a lot of people don't know this, is that you can get your funding earlier if you are a private school that takes scholarships in the state of Florida. So instead of you having to wait until September 15th ish is what it's looking like for our part-time tutors or even our full-time tutors. I don't know when they get paid, but I think they have to wait as well because we have to wait until after services are rendered in the state of Florida. If you're going to have to wait until services are rendered, it can take us September. Usually the money doesn't drop until about September. For private schools that are in the state of Florida, I don't know who else that is on, but hello, welcome. In the state of Florida, you can get your money as early as I think late August or even early August. You get your funding drop. So if you're a private school, you get your funding drop. Also, students don't have to request the payments in the EMA as a private school. So that's one benefit. So generally for us, we have to ask parents to go ahead and request their payments for their services. And that sometimes takes time. And of course, as you know, kind of going after parents and going, hey, can you please go ahead and request funding can be a little bit of a challenge. But that's one of the big things about being a private school that is a benefit is that you don't have to do that. They literally just ask for your school name. They put your school name in. And usually around August 1st, they will send your money to you. There are some times where they're a little bit late, but at the end of the day, that's the difference between a private school and part-time tutoring when it comes to money. Of course. Thank you, Aisha. But you can offer diplomas as a private school. You get grants and scholarships more easily. You get your step-up funds a little bit early in the state of Florida. You can build towards accreditation as a private school. If you're looking at FLVS Flex in Florida, then you generally, they have like a way you can communicate with them and you can get their courses for free or super low cost. So that is one of the things that people kind of like about doing the private school. Now, why do most of us end up going with the part-time tutoring route? It's a lot easier to start up. To be a part-time tutor is a lot easier to start up. A lot of microschools run as tutoring centers for a few different reasons. And one of the major reasons that I know we run as a tutoring center is because we generally are doing part-time tutoring with our students. We are not there all day doing academics. Generally, it's like a 90-minute block of academics, and that's considered tutoring. So it really falls under the category of tutoring a lot easier. The building requirements are a lot different. We generally don't have as many students in our program. So we really do fall under a tutoring program or even a learning center type program. And that's a lot easier for us to get funded as a part-time tutor. We have certified teachers on staff, things like that. So under Florida law, it's a little bit easier. So if you're just joining me, thank you so much for watching. I'm basically talking about why we chose a part-time tutoring instead of a private school route for our program. I feel like it's a lot easier for us, and that's why we chose that. It's a lot less red tape. It's faster to get families enrolled usually. We can take the scholarship payments from EMA, just parents do need to have to go in and ask for it. We don't have to handle the birth certificates or immunization records. We don't have to handle all of that kind of like requirements, the same like health department stuff, generally speaking. It's usually just a lot easier and a lot faster to do that. So when somebody asked me this yesterday, and I was like, I think I have to get on live and answer that question. What would I choose if I ever had to do it again? So if I had the choice, if I had a building that the private school would be approved for pretty quickly. Oh, another thing about building, usually you also might need something called a traffic study. And sometimes you might even need something called a noise study. And these are just all these kind of things that pop up along the lines that you may not know about. In Florida, they did just pass a law that said that if your building was already approved for like community use of a school or anything like that in the past, that it most likely will be approved right away. A lot of cities are not up to date with that just yet. So a suggestion is that you really know the law. Yes, Every Kid. I always get it wrong and say Yes Legal. Yes, Every Kid is a great resource to have in the state of Florida. You can contact Yes Every Kid and ask them a lot of questions about this. They will help break it down for you, especially if you're having zoning issues and things like that. Just to kind of summarize what I said there, if I had to choose between a private school and tutoring, which is how we do things now in our microschool, I'd probably personally still go with tutoring. I like it a lot better. Now, if I didn't have a choice, I have one, we coach people on how to start microschools. I have one group right now that's going, and they basically said you can have more than, I think, 5 students if you do tutoring at a time, which that's one of the ways that they say, hey, if you have more than this amount, then this is what the rule is around that. Okay. That's a challenge. And I feel like that's something that, is kind of like, okay, like, but if we're in a church and, everything else is working out, like, why can't we have more? But if you're required by your city or your municipality that says that you're not allowed to have a certain amount or a certain, Coconut Creek is very, very strict. There's different cities that are very, very strict about what they allow. Then we would move towards a private school and start the process for private school. Private school takes a lot more work in the state of Florida. But like I said, there are some pros in it, especially if you're going to be working with like FOBS or you're going to be working with another private school that's online. Generally a lot easier. You can also give diplomas. The other thing is that families, especially homeschooling families coming into microschools, they generally don't know what the rules are and expectations are. So you need to be really clear about what you are. If you're going to be doing a private school, then you have to be really, really clear about, hey, we're a microschool. We really are a tutoring program versus a private school. So you still need to, if you're a regular homeschooler, you still need to maintain your portfolio. You still need to take the test at the end of the year. You still need to do certain things as a homeschooler or as a tutoring student here versus if you were a private school student, which sometimes those same expectations are not required. So if you do, if you're able to do a lot of kind of like teaching your families what it takes to be when you're in a public, private school versus if you're in a micro school, then you'll be great. If you are thinking, I know a space that's going to be great for my private school. If you are thinking that you're okay with doing the admin work, and then the people from the state, from the Department of Education, and that's where you're going to get a lot of your content from, go to Florida Department of Education. You go to Florida Department of Education and you're going to have to speak with them. Generally, the person you end up with is Scott Early. He's going to come in after you finish an entire checklist. That's like 20 things, I think. And then he comes to your building and he makes sure that everything is in order. And then they approve you. That can be a timely thing. That can take some time. I've seen people get it done very, very quickly, but for us personally, it took us like a year. And then once the bill passed that said that we can take funding as certified teachers, we were like, that's what we're going to go for, because I didn't want to deal with all the paperwork that came along with it. But if you're in a building that's already that can handle that, then yes. And she was also asking, somebody reached out to me in our community. She was also asking, oh, when I'm doing my tour, I'm going to ask that. The thing is that sometimes on your tour, they may not know. So even a tour is not going to really cut it. So if you're looking at spaces and you're going, I think this space might be good for a private school, your best bet is to actually check with the fire department, check with the health department, see if you can even reach out to Department of Education and make sure that it's going to be okay, just to be extra, extra safe. Because the last thing I want happening to anyone is they go into a space, they pay the lease, they might pay it for a few months, and then realize once they're doing the health department or the radon testing or whatever else that's required, they get to a point that they realize, oh my gosh, like, I can't actually use this space for a private school. And now I can't even use it for a part-time tutoring program because I've already asked for it to be a private school, when in all reality, you're really doing tutoring. So that's kind of my thought process on that. I'm like looking at my notes. Okay, so some of the questions that sometimes also come up. Do I need to be a certified teacher to run a private school? In the state of Florida, you do not need to be a certified teacher. Generally, to be a teacher here at a private school, you have to have a bachelor's degree, but you do not have to be certified. And to own one, you do not need to be certified at all, okay? Can you homeschool other people's kids if you're not a private school? Can you homeschool other people's kids? You absolutely can homeschool other people's kids. Generally, if you want to accept state funding, then it's usually there's some requirements under Step Up for students that require you to do certain things like homeschool enrichment, things of that nature. Can you homeschool your own children or teach your own children and get the funding? No, you cannot, if that's going to be another question. How do you get zoning clearance for your school or program? Ooh, zoning. So zoning, and this is across the country from what I've seen. Typically, the way you get your approval for your zoning is I usually start with, if you're going to be doing it in your home, you can check with your homeowners association is usually the first step. And then I would check with my city. Hey, is it okay for me to do like this childcare sometimes out of my home? I would also check with your, and then you go to your county. Your county may have requirements as well. And you can ask them, hey, what are the requirements for me to have this business out of my home? And then you can deal with the state. Okay. Generally speaking, a lot of people just end up kind of doing it out of their home, especially if they're in a very private area, on a farm, things like that. So a lot of times you might be able to kind of bypass that. A lot of people, especially in Florida, they end up having to deal with childcare requirements. So childcare and licensing is a requirement, and Broward County has requirements where they will come out and they will check. A lot of people who run microschools become exempt with the childcare, and usually it's not that challenging. Again, yes, every kid is great for helping with that form and has helped a lot of people get through that form and basically get approval for their zoning if they're doing it in their home. You also want to speak to the city master planner. The city master planner in your city is who really handles what place is zoned for what place. So say you're looking at a place and you're thinking about leasing it and you want to know if it can be a private school, then you're going to want to call your city master planner or the planning department of your city. And usually they pull up this big map and they'll be able to tell you. Another thing that I like to look at when I was looking at schools and locations was something called Muni Code. It's MUNICODE. And that will tell you like what some of the codes are and what's required. So for example, in the city of Margate requires you to have a roundabout in front of your school or like a bus loop. So it doesn't matter how small your school is, you need a bus loop. That was already like that for my 10 kids. I'm not going to most likely find a building with a bus loop. If you're just joining me, thank you so much for watching. I'm basically answering questions about zoning, planning, private schools, microschools, part-time tutoring, things like that. Can you take Step Up or ESA funds as a tutoring business? In Florida, yes. Texas, no, as of right now. There's a lot of states that are popping up and different states allow for different things. Georgia is a yes now. If you're in one of my blue states, I'm sorry, you probably don't have ESA at all. But a lot of states are now allowing tutors to take it for funding. What's the fastest way to get started without all the red tape? Definitely, it's going to be going as a part-time tutor. Absolutely fastest way. Because you don't have to get all the zoning requirements generally. Tutoring is very different than school. Tutoring is very, very different than school and comes up legally and regulation wise a lot different. And it makes sense. The moment that you say the word school, a lot of people are thinking, oh my gosh, you are going to have 200 kids coming out to this building. And generally, no, I'm working with a homeschool group. It's probably going to be 5 kids. It's a very different animal than like what people are used to when they hear the word school. Quite honestly, whenever I talk to people, I'm always like, don't even say the word microschool. They hear the word school and they're immediately red flags go up. And then you start explaining to them. And by then they're kind of like, I don't really know. So I usually say start off with like tutoring program, because there's a ton of small group tutoring programs. Kumon has more than 5 kids, right? And you're going to be doing something very similar to Kumon, small group tutoring. So that's probably why I generally like to say tutoring is what I go with and I suggest. Do you need to take attendance? As a private school, you do need to take attendance. You do need to give tests as a private school in the state of Florida. So that is something. Generally, it's the MAP test in the state of Florida. Different states have different requirements, but generally I've seen that attendance and taking tests is generally a requirement. It's usually under the accountability clause. So I highly suggest if you are going to become a private school, another thing is you do need to take attendance and you need to report it and you need to give tests. So be ready for that. How do you convert your microschool into a private school? So I love this question. So I really like to talk about this because I always tell people to try to start as a microschool before you go into private school. I say that because there's a lot of money up front to becoming a private school, usually a lot more money than you even know going in. So a lot of times you go in as a private school, you can start all the things and you can get to one level and they're like, oh, you need a drain in the bathroom now. And that's going to cost you $50,000. And if you don't have that $50,000, then unfortunately you probably just spent $100,000 on getting this building up to code. And now you're running into an issue. So I always say start off as a microschool. See if you like the facility. See if you enjoy being there. See if you enjoy what is happening in that space, or start off in your home if you have that option. I love telling people to start small. Start small. Start small, because if you start small, the mistakes that you make are generally small. And when you make little mistakes, they cost a lot less money than big mistakes. Don't ask me how I know. Like, believe me, I've made all the mistakes that you can probably think about. So I am telling you, if you can convert your micro school into a private school later, that's the best way to go. If you can start with a micro and very small part-time tutoring program, start like that, and then you can grow into a private school for sure. Make sure you find a building that's going to be zoned for it and that's going to be approved for it, and you should be good to go. What happens if you start without zoning and someone complains? Ooh, this is such a good question. That's a tricky one. That's why I always say to people, like, to try to start with zoning, try to get them on your side, from the beginning, because if you start without zoning and then someone complains, you can be shut down, and that's not a fun thing to be. This actually just happened in Coconut Creek. They got shut down. It wasn't for very long. They had good lawyers on their side and they kind of fought it. And I feel like it ended up working out later, but there was a moment where they did have to shut down. So getting approval, honestly, is a big suggestion. Having your community support is a good idea as well. If your family's ready to kind of go to bat for you to the city, then you can end up, talking to them and reducing your numbers possibly, and or communicating with them and seeing if you can get an exemption. Sometimes that works. So, but I always say start with your zoning approval as much as possible. That is pretty much it. I am trying to answer as many questions as I can. We're coming up at the new school year. And I have another live going next week so we're going into the week July 28th. July 28th until August 4th, I'm going to have a Microschool a money in your Microschool week, talking all things money and mindset for microschools. And I'm going to be going live every day, starting at 11 a.m., starting next Monday. So excited to see everybody. It's going to be on my Facebook page, Iman Cassels Aline, and I'm going to make sure that my captions are correct here so that you can see my name spelled correctly and follow me on Facebook. And I'm going to most likely post it to all my different outlets. But follow me, come in live, ask me questions. I'm so excited to help answer questions because I get to do what I love. So thanks for watching. Have a wonderful day. Bye, y'all.